I will admit I used to put food coloring in milk when I was a little kid.
I've always enjoyed getting thrown under the bus. Rage makes great radio.
Way to make a precious moment seem so selfish.
Oh no, you don't have to agree with Giles. The point is actually to disagree with everything he says.
That should be at the top of my resume. I think if it didn't make you cry, you're dead inside. You cannot or choose not to.
You're listening to Beyond the Trope.
From BeyondTheTrope.com. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Beyond the Trope. I'm Giles.
And I'm Michelle.
And before we begin, we have some awesome information to share with you.
You guys, if you haven't been listening to the Functional Nerds, you really need to. Their episodes come out every Tuesday, just like ours do. They're probably more functional than we are in the nerd world. Maybe? I don't know. Don't ask Patrick. He'll probably lie to you. But Patrick and Tracy have been working together for over a year now.
Yeah, about a year and a half.
Coming up on 2 years in April.
And they just released episode 500.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's incredible.
So you should check them out, functionalnerds.com.
This week, it's a discussion episode, so we're jumping back into memory lane, and we're going to talk about some of our favorite topics in elementary and high school.
Also, probably least favorite topics.
Probably.
That's a fun one.
Yeah. So, Michelle, do you want to get us started?
Let me think.
Okay. Well, while you're thinking, I can definitely share what my favorite was.
You have one? Okay.
Yeah. So, for those of our listeners who don't know, starting in second grade, I was homeschooled, and starting in third grade, and we actually did. My parents had an audiovisual company, and we did a conference every year for a local homeschooling organization, and they had a booth there for a specific creative writing curriculum, and they pulled up that creative writing curriculum for me, and I was able to go through it. I did the entire book. It included writing a restaurant review, writing a short story. I can't remember what else there was in there. It was this blue, like, tooth-bound, you know, the little plastic binder things that you just kind of spread open and hope that all of the things slip into the slats in the pages.
Yeah.
And that was basically it. I remember almost nothing about it, but then a couple of years later, the Christian Writers Guild, before Jerry Jenkins bought it, had set up a booth. I think it was actually at that same conference just a couple of years later. And so I signed up for that and did the entire apprenticeship that had been set up. It was the same apprenticeship that they'd been doing since, I think, the late 70s, with a few updates, obviously, to deal with technology, including AOL, the CDs that you could get at the post office and under your movie theater seats and in the mail, and basically free with any six-pack at Domino's. And so I did that, and so creative writing was actually one of my favorite courses, obviously, that panned out to actually lead me to a career of pursuing writing. I am a professional author because I've been published and paid for it, but beyond that, I haven't really done a whole lot of creative writing lately. But that's going to change soon. I'm actually taking some creative writing classes as my electives to finish out my degree.
That's a nice way to end things. As you've been talking, I've obviously been listening, but also trying to think, like, what was my favorite? I remember for some reason, I really remember 5th grade science. I don't even know what exactly we learned. I know one day my dad came in to guest teach. It wasn't there were not more parents. It was just my father. And we were talking about weights and mass. And he made a joke, because my last name is Graham, about how I only weigh 1 gram. Yeah.
That's like the epitome of a dad joke.
It was mortifying. But now I think about it, I'm like, that was a good joke. That's funny. It's not spelled the same, so obviously I weigh a gram, but not a gram.
More like a graham cracker.
Maha. God, I also love graham crackers.
They're so good.
So I've always really liked my science classes, as long as they weren't biology or anatomy.
Nothing where you have to deal with blood and guts?
Nope. 0%. I feel like I've said this before, but I've fainted at the sight and or smell of dissections. Yeah, we don't need to talk about that. But if it was astronomy or physics or kind of chemistry, I struggled with chemistry because I wanted to blow things up, but felt more like we just spent all of our time memorizing the periodic table.
And there's also a lot of math in a lot of those science classes. And if you don't like math, it's really hard to get into science.
Yeah. Well, I liked math. I took calculus my junior year. And up until that point, I thought that I was going to be a scientist. I thought I was going to go into aeronautical engineering or astrophysics, something like that. And then I was like, I like math, but I really don't love it.
You don't want to live math?
I don't want to live the language of math, no. But I did really like my chemistry teacher, even though I didn't love the chemistry subject. Mm-hmm. He was a really great teacher. For our bell work, do now, whatever you want to call it, he would usually have videos of his daughter, who at the time was 3 or 4. And he was teaching her the periodic table, and she had it memorized better than we did. And that made us feel really unintelligent. But she was so cute, saying, like a little kid saying all of those big words, uranium. So great.
I think that's awesome, though, that even though you didn't particularly care for the subject, you actually have good memories of the teacher, which shows that that's a good educator who can make it so that a subject you're not super excited about isn't a subject you suddenly hate.
Yeah. No, I was just mad that I didn't blow things up. That was literally it. Mm-hmm. Because everyone always said, oh yeah, in chemistry you get to mix things together and you get to see what happens. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's a bomb making class? It wasn't at all. No.
The last science class that I was supposed to take for high school was, I got to pick, and one of the options was basically electronics, so the science of electronics. And there is so much math involved, and I was struggling with a lot of math because I had reached the point in math where I surpassed my parents' knowledge. So they basically handed me the math books and said, here, figure it out.
Good luck.
And then they would grade based on the rubric, or the
answer key.
Yeah, the answer key. And so I ended up spending hours on the phone with my youth pastor, who had been an Algebra 2 high school teacher for 20 years. And so I spent a lot of time with him, like, okay, here's what I'm looking at. I don't even know how to begin solving this problem. But by the end, I actually understood it well enough to graduate high school, which was awesome. But it doesn't make it easy to figure out what... So a lot of the math in electronics specifically is based off of a calculation times pi squared. So anytime you get pi involved, it's going to get complicated. Anytime you have to square pi, which is essentially an infinite number, you're in trouble.
I always giggle when people talk about squaring pi because everyone knows pies are round.
Not necessarily. If you get a good meat pie, it can be brick-shaped.
That's a rectangle. It's not square.
True, but it has square corners.
Oh, Lord. I also really loved my art classes. As I've been doing my kitchen remodel, had to pack up a bunch of stuff and move boxes around in my storage shed and everything. And I found a box of things I made in middle school. And one of these things is a clay mermaid who's kind of like that iconic Little Mermaid scene where she's half on the rock, half on the water, and pushing herself up, and the wave breaks behind her. It was essentially that, but not the Little Mermaid, but a mermaid.
Yeah.
And I was so proud of that thing. Man, I put individual scales on her tail, and I painted the rock to look like a rock. It was great.
That's really cool.
I love that class. My school did a really good job giving creative choice to their students in all their art classes from elementary through high school. So, or maybe it was just me. We were always doing different things. It's very possible that I just was given the freedom to do whatever artistic thing I wanted. That literally just occurred to me because that happened when I was in high school. there was an AP art class that I wasn't technically in. Because I was taking AP history and AP English. And I was like, I don't need a third AP class. I'm not crazy.
Right.
But my teacher let me do what the AP students were doing. Ha! That's funny. I never thought of that before.
I did try to pick up drawing like after I graduated. So after I was no longer in high school, because I graduated a year early, one of the perks of homeschooling. So I picked up, at the time there were no books on how to draw anime. And so I found somebody who was running a website. This was back in like early 2002. She was running a website with instructions on how to do anime style drawing. And she was also an art student at the time. And she worked on self-publishing a book that she sold as CD-ROM instructions. So she would send them to you as CD-ROM instructions in a PDF format.
CD-ROMs.
So I bought, and basically she wrote the book. This is where I really learned my hatred for mixing up then versus than, because she always inverted the two in that book and it drove me nuts. Everything else about the English, from what I remember, was very good. Just that one thing. It was called Baka Neko, which is Japanese for stupid cat. But I got the CD-ROM. She had even printed the label with the fancy label CD labels that you can just print through your regular printer and then slap on the CD.
Yeah.
And I had that for a very long time. And then I printed up the entire book and I was learning to draw anime style. I even learned how to do some Photoshop stuff because my parents had Photoshop for their company. And so I was able to use the key to use Photoshop, and I did some electronic inking essentially and colorized it. It's on the old computer that I have upstairs, and it was a lot of fun. And I think I did halfway decent with it for someone who was terrible at my art classes in actual school.
Yeah. How funny.
My least favorite class.
CD-ROM.
I had two least favorite classes. One was math, because I was just left to do my own thing, even though I ended up being really good at it. And when I did my college math course, I actually did really well too, because I am actually fairly good at math when I put my mind. Yeah, when I want to be. I really don't want to be. That's the annoying part. Like when I was doing home brewing, they have specific formulas to make sure that you get all of the sugar ratios and like hop ratios and things correct. And the one that requires grains to water, etc. I was able to memorize that one fairly quickly and put together recipes on the fly while I was in the homebrew store. And just figure out, well, okay, I know that this specific gravity of this grain mixed with this specific gravity of this grain per gallon of water that I need to use will get me approximately this final gravity of sugars, and then I can build the rest of it from there. Then I went home and plugged it into the computer software that I had that would do the math for me automatically, because that's what you do to make sure your math is correct. And I was actually spot on. And then my actual brew day was spot on too. I think I was 1 point off, but that's because there's any number of reasons why you can be off in the actual brew day. Things like the temperature of the water, the boil, etc. If you had any of your actual measurements off. But my basic math on that end was correct, because I'm actually good at doing the math when I memorize things. I just don't like to memorize things. Then my other least favorite class was my apprenticeship for my parents' company.
Well, that I'm not surprised.
I learned a lot, and I earned a lot of money. If I had not wasted money on stupid stuff, I probably would have left high school with $10,000 in the bank.
That would have been nice.
As it was, I think I left high school with $3,000 in the bank, which is why I was able to live on my own for a year, working crappy retail jobs at minimum wage.
Wow. I'm trying to think of other least favorite classes.
Chemistry.
Oh, yeah, that's what we talked about.
Yeah.
Chemistry.
Sorry, I forgot my notebook. I had to go find it.
It's
so I
okay.
missed that
You
part.
found it.
I found my notebook.
I had more like teachers I wasn't a huge fan of than I did subjects I didn't like. Because in general, I went to class and I like did the homework and kind of participated if they forced me to. But in general, I would kind of do all the work on my own in my classes anyways. Like I didn't really like biology, but again, I really loved my freshman biology teacher. She was awesome.
Mrs. Stevenson. Loved her. She was great.
Right? Yeah, Yeah, it's mostly the, like, I like half of science and not the other half of science. I almost liked my genetics class. That was a body-related science that I didn't hate, but it was so complex, and it was really difficult for me to wrap my head around. That was in college. One of those things that you take, you're like, oh yeah, I could do this. And then partway through, you're like, oh my God.
What have I done?
What have I done? I have to do work to understand this? Nah.
Did you take any languages in high school?
I took French.
Okay.
I remember I thought about taking it my freshman year, but I was really worried about overwhelming myself. Now when I think about it, I'm like, it would have been fine. So I started taking French my sophomore year. I took it 3 years from there. And then I kept taking it in college. So I was always in like art and French and AP classes. I really liked my French class. That was fun. Of course, my school was kind of known for having terrible Spanish teachers. Like really bad. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really care about Spanish at the time anyways, because my mom really liked French and she had gone to France, so I kind of grew up having her talk about it. That was a fun class. One time, I don't even know why, but we roasted tiny marshmallows over candles. Like, why not? We would have French cooking days, and one day that was the dessert we did.
That's funny.
I took German in high school one year, and the only thing that I remember is our teacher told us to find a phrase that we wanted to learn, and that could be like our one thing that we definitely learned. And so I learned how to say, "I am very tired."
And what is that?
Ich bin sehr müde.
That's amazing.
I still remember it.
Yeah, all throughout elementary school and high school, my mom had bought one of those immersion, like listen to the tapes type of like language sets, and it was German. And so all throughout high school and elementary school, I tried to pick up some German. I also got a CD again from that homeschooling conference to learn Polish because my uncle is a missionary in Poland. So I figured, hey, I'll learn Polish. I could go over there and visit him, and I could actually speak the language. I didn't get the one phrase I remember is Yosho jedno piwo. So I'd like another beer. And I probably got that wrong because it's been, I think, 20 years since I actually said that phrase.
Those phrases that you both learned are just so fitting for who you are.
Die Katze liest eine Zeitung.
Something about a cat.
A cat reads a newspaper.
Ooh, I know we had kind of intended to make this more like elementary through high school, but one of my absolute favorite classes I ever took was the physics of sound.
Oh, yeah.
When I was at CU Boulder. Not only was the professor super dynamic and fun, the material was just so fascinating. And we had to make our own instruments at one point. And I made mine using like rubber bands and a paper towel roll. And we had to explain scientifically, like, it essentially was kind of like a guitar. Like, okay, this rubber band makes this sound because of this. This one is thicker and longer. It makes this sound because of this. That was so cool. It was so fun.
I feel like I did that at one point. I think I made a guitar out of a shoebox and a paper towel roll.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds like a school project.
Yeah. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
There are people who are doing it now with wooden cigar boxes. So after people have bought all the cigars, they'll actually pin the cigar boxes together,
Yeah.
drill a hole into it, put electronics in there, and they're really expensive because they're handcrafted
Yeah.
and they're made to be pieces of art that
so
are also
cool.
functional. So depending on who you ask, they're not actually art because there are some artists who insist that if it has a function, it cannot possibly be art. And those people are terrible people. If art has function, it can still be art. But yeah, they're really cool. I think the cheapest one I saw is like $2,000.
Jeez.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, what would those people say about architecture?
It's not art. If it has a function, it's not art. And the reason that I know this exists is because there was a group there was a homebrewing team that actually built a metal structure that was also a homebrewing setup. So it was a full homebrewing system that did the boil, like the mash, the boil, all the way through the fermentation, but it was also built to look like a piece of art. And they won like the New York City Art Grant that year. And everybody else who had competed said it was a bullcrap award because if art has function, it ceases to be art. So they wanted the money to have created their functionless art pieces.
I don't like that. That makes me deeply angry.
This is why people hate artists. People like that are why people hate artists.
Yeah, well, you can find snobs in pretty much any field, though.
That's true.
This is true.
There are definitely snobs.
They're
I'm sure
everywhere.
I'm sure we could find some podcasting snobs who would say that what we do isn't a legitimate podcast because we're not talking, I don't know, true crime because true crime is the only true podcast anymore or something. We're not getting high with Elon Musk.
Wow.
The only person in this room who's slightly high right now is the cat because he ate catnip. And
He's conked out. He looks very comfortable, though. Wow. Any last classes or subjects that really stick out?
I really did enjoy my Tai Chi class when I was going to Red Rocks.
You took a Tai Chi class?
It was a 1-credit phys ed class. I was required, if I was going to get my associates there, I was required to have, I think, 3 credits of phys ed. So I was going to take level 1 and then level 2. That would be 2 credits total. Actually, that class is why I'm 1 credit short of completing my electives versus being on time. So I have...
Why didn't you take... Didn't they have classes that were worth more?
There weren't any, I had always wanted to do martial arts, and Tai Chi is an actual martial art too. And so I figured, hey, this is an opportunity for me to learn a low impact martial art.
I mean, it is, you know, if you think about it, less functional than the other martial arts. So it's a true art.
Depends on which Tai Chi form you're using. Like, if it's yoga, it is absolutely functionless. But if it's Tai Chi, it's one of the most deadly forms of Kung Fu.
Everybody was Tai Chi fighting.
And that's copyright. But yeah, I really enjoyed Tai Chi, and then I took 2 years of French. So I took 10 credit hours of French because there were 2 5-credit hour courses.
Wow.
Yeah, that was 5 hours a week for 15 weeks for 2 semesters.
Credits are so weird. Like, someone sits there and decides, this is how much this class should be worth. It's Emmy. Emmy sits there and decides. She has the power.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Sometimes it feels so arbitrary, though.
Oh, it is sometimes. I mean, most of the time, like the way that our university works is usually the dean decides how many credits it's going to be, and then it's my job to make sure that it's worth it. Like,
okay.
So then there's like benchmarks that I have to hit. So if it's a 3-credit class, then I need to make sure that there's 3 credits worth of work in there. Otherwise, it's like, why are you paying for this? This is stupid. So,
Yeah.
Before the era of accelerated online classes, I think the rule was however many hours a week you spent on the course.
I mean, the way that our university works, it's pretty much still that way.
Or
where
in
you're
seat.
expected to have a certain amount of direct
Like
instruction
in the
hours,
class.
indirect, and then total for a week. So
Yeah, the way I had it explained to me is if it was a like a 3-credit hour class, you were required to spend 3 hours in the classroom per week.
that's probably the way it was at one point or another. Yeah.
Still feels arbitrary. Grumble, grumble, grumble.
You know what's not arbitrary? Giving us ratings and reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. It is actually meaningful. We got a new one recently. I check every now and then. I don't respond to them, but
Why not? That could be fun.
because you don't respond to people's opinions on your product. Let them enjoy it or hate it as they will. And if they have constructive feedback that they want to post in those ratings and reviews, we're more than happy to look at it and listen and maybe adjust depending on how our show works. Like
We probably won't.
if we have people write in and say, hey, you should do this, like a 10 episode series on John Wayne Gacy, we'll say that's not our show.
Who is that?
He was the clown serial killer.
He killed clowns?
No, he was a clown. He was a serial killer who dressed up as a clown.
Ew. Why?
I don't know.
How do you know these things?
Because I know things sometimes.
His brain is full of useless knowledge.
Anyway.
Everyone needs a hobby.
That's not our show. So if that's the feedback, then we'll kindly, respectfully disregard it. But if you have feedback like, hey, you should have this person on the show, obviously you can send us emails with that kind of thing too. But yeah, give us ratings and reviews on iTunes and Stitcher. You can also listen on Spotify and iHeartRadio. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And if you can, please consider supporting us financially. You can do that in two places. I was going to say the first place, but they're tied for first, let's be honest. One of them is at patreon.com/beyondthetrope, where you can give us a teeny tiny $1 a month to help us keep these podcasting lights on. For a little bit more, you can also listen to commentaries that Giles and I record about TV shows and movies. It's pretty entertaining. It's like hanging out with us on the couch on a superb Friday night, just going crazy with a movie. Like the awesome people we are. You can also go to redbubble.com where our merch store is. We have several different creative designs that you can put on just about anything you can imagine. They make great gifts. They make great nerdy conversation pieces. I mean, who doesn't need more stickers? You all need more stickers.
All the stickers. Maybe a t-shirt.
Covered with stickers.
Yep.
Anyways, thanks for listening, you guys.
Bye. This podcast is copyrighted by Page 42 Productions, LLC under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license, which means if you're not for profit, feel free to quote us as long as you cite us, and if you are for profit, ask our permission first. You can find us at beyondthetrope.com, on Twitter at beyondthetrope, and on Facebook. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.